Hello everyone, we are back finishing our test of the Rane commercial RH-2. And we've already done the RH-50 and done the whole gamut of the test, and I've told you that the RH-50 is a decent headphone, especially for the price, if you want to get about average to above average, slightly above average, detail retrieval and clarity and comfort on top of that. But the treble response of the RH-50 is problematic, especially for me, because I am a little treble sensitive. And so that's not really a great option for anybody who wants to sit back and relax and listen to, say, orchestral pieces or songs that have a lot of treble or sparkle. Because if that type of person can't handle treble, then the RH-50 is not going to be a pleasing pair of headphones at all. So the RH-2, its presentation of the treble is different. Now, we already know that the presentation of the RH-2's bass is vastly different from the RH-50. The RH-2 has a bumped up bass, a deeper sounding bass, a more fun sounding bass, if you will, whereas the RH-50 has a more lean bass response, probably more accurate. But the treble is where I think people are really going to find some comfort, because you may not care about the bass response. You may not listen to songs that have processed and overemphasized bass anyway, so having a little bit more bass bump on the RH-2 may not make a whole lot of difference to you. But the treble might, and so that's what we're going to test today. We're going to find out if the treble of the RH-2 is rounded off enough that you can actually enjoy songs that have sparkle and emphasized treble. So we've got 3 songs that we have queued on Amazon Music HD. We have Scherzo for X-Wings, Flight from the City, Bim Bam Smash, and that's the Born Supremacy soundtrack track. And then we're going to talk about the conclusions. I've got the headphone plugged into the RME ADI2 DAC as usual for this particular test. Current volume is negative 40, but you know what? Let's go to negative 42. That's going to be our starting volume, and we'll adjust as we go from there. All right, so here we go with Scherzo for X-Wings. Negative 42 is a little light on the volume, so I'm going to increase. I'm going to take it negative 25, and that is exceptionally loud. It's loud enough that I can barely hear myself speak. So right here. So here's the thing. I've adjusted the volume to very loud. This is probably as max as anyone should ever listen on these pair of headphones. And there's this point of the song around 18 seconds in where you have this, the Star Trek, Star Wars theme song, right? Da, 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 da. And it gets ear-piercing with the RH-50. The RH-2 rolls that treble off a lot, and even at negative 25 decibels, which is exceptionally loud, that music, that tone, that instrument does not become ear-piercing or harsh or distorted, and it certainly is not fatiguing. Let's keep playing. I can hear the brass separate from the other instruments. I could hear the percussion. I hear the trumpet, the horns. So that you can hear all the group sets in the music. You can't hear any individual player. So let's say you have 4 horns in that group. You can't hear the individual hornies. You can't hear the horn players. You can hear the horn group as a whole, which tends to be the case with a lot of headphones. There's very few headphones out there that start distinguishing the individual tonalities of each instrument and each player. So the RH-2 is by no means remarkable in this extent. It is, in fact, pretty average. The more I listen to this song on high volume, the more easy it is to listen to, right? Because this can become really harsh with analytical sounding headphones. The DT1770, even the 1990 can become a little harsh, even though the 1990 has much better controlled treble than the 1770. The 800S, oh my God, it's going to ear pierce your ears if you have a neutral amp DAC or an analytical amp DAC. And even with a warmer DAC amp, it can become a little bit too much, especially at higher volumes. And the RH-2 paired with a neutral DAC amp like the RME, no fatiguing at all. We are a minute and a half into the song. We've had the horns blowing in our ears. We've had the trumpets going. We've got the brass going. We get all these instruments at high volume that would otherwise become difficult to listen to are not. So the treble is exceptionally rolled off. Now, a lot of people would say, well, I don't want treble rolled off. I'm going to miss the details. That is true. You are missing details that's present in the treble region with some of these instruments because of that roll-off. But in excuse me. But in exchange, you get a much more easy listening experience, a much more, I wouldn't say musical, because to some people, a musical listening experience means that you get the sparkle when you get that treble detail and maybe the treble emphasis. So I'm not going to say musical. I will say it is a relaxing representation of the mids, or excuse me, the treble. All right, so let's go to Flight from the City by Johan Johansson, and it's still at -25. I assume I'm going to have to bring the volume down, but let's try anyway. Yeah, I'm going to decrease to about -28. See, what the bass does is that it emphasizes the keystrokes on the piano. So you hear the thunk, thunk, as the piano keys are hitting the piano body itself, right? The casing. And so you hear that reverberating thunk. No harshness, no distortion, no peakiness. In fact, the sound stage is about average. The piano sounds as if it's about maybe 10 feet away from me. I'm not getting all the details from the piano. Let me be clear about that. So when you stand too close to an instrument, obviously there's not enough space between you and the instrument for the sound to dissipate and you start picking up a little bit more of the details. There is a specific distance, and you're talking about room and the size of the room and the way the room is constructed, the instrument, the player, and all sorts of other factors. But all other things being equal, the distance between you and the instrument is important. It's relevant. And if you're too close to an instrument, it may sound distorted to you, or you may lose out on details. If you're too far away, it may just sound too muted to you and you're losing out on the details. So there is like a comfort zone where you get to hear the instrument and you get to hear the details and you get to hear all the nuances of a particular instrument. The piano in this case, I think it's a little too close sounding to get the details. It's almost like if you were 4 feet away, further away, you might pick up a little bit more of the nuance in the music of the piano. That being said, even though you're about 10 feet away, it sounds like you're 10 feet away, the piano does not sound harsh and it's not distorting. You're just losing out on the details of that piano. Now, throughout the song, there are micro details, and the micro details include two things. One, the pianist moving back and forth on his bench as he's sitting there playing, and the cello. There are times when you should hear the cellist, whatever, kind of brushing against the strings of the instrument, and you get this creaking sound. If you've ever played a guitar or a violin, and you just brush your fingertip, your thumb against the string, you get that characteristic sound. It's, like a creaking or a squeaking, depending on the instrument. And that's basically what you should hear. It's the cellist playing, and then it he or she stops playing, and you can hear that creaking as the hand or just brushes against the string, essentially. Those are the two micro details you should pick up. Now, the micro detail about the pianist moving back and forth, that does show up early, but it then gets lost throughout the mix, even though it's there. And the micro detail about the string, that comes out. It's not particularly clear, but if you're paying attention, it'll come out. And it just came out around 2 minutes of this song, where the piano's playing and the cello's playing, and they both stop playing so that their notes are reverberating, and you can hear the squeaking noise or the touching of the string noise as the cellist just brushes against the string. Yeah. So very relaxing sound signature. This is the total opposite of an analytical sound, because an analytical sound is going to give you theoretically better separation of the bass, mids, and treble. The bass is definitely interacting with some of this track, because that bumped up bass response really does reverberate, meaning whenever the piano is playing, some of the bassier keys on the piano reverberate and they mingle with the other tones. Moreover, whenever the pianist is hitting down on the key, you can hear that thunk sound. And that's a fun sound to listen to, but it's not supposed to be as emphasized if you're talking about true neutral. And then you have the treble roll-off. Now, on this song, there's not a whole lot of treble to worry about. In fact, there's very little treble to worry about. Much less than with Scherzo for X-Wings. So you might think that with a song like this, you're not really missing out on anything because there's not much to miss out on. And I think that's probably true, because since there is no treble bump, or there's no instrument that is really pushing the treble, there's nothing really to roll off. And I think that seems to be true for the RH-2. All right, so let's go to our last song, Bim Bam Smash from the Bourne Supremacy. Now, the reason I want to play this is because it's got a great bass rumble. If you've never heard the song, if you've never watched this movie, you gotta watch the movie. But listen to the song. Go to YouTube or go to Spotify, Tidal, whatever. Just go there and look up this particular track, Bim Bam Smash, and sit there and listen to it. And you should be able to hear that rumble. And if you don't hear that rumble, if you don't hear the big, thick bass response, then you probably have more analytical headphones than you have more bass-heavy headphones. Or in the alternative, you have fairly neutral headphones that are just not accentuating the bass all that much. The RH-2 we know has an accentuated bass, so let's find out how it sounds on this orchestral piece where the bass really is king, right? Here we go. It's going to start any second. Yeah, immediately you hear that bass coming in, and it's just almost like I'm standing about 2 feet away from that drum, that big, huge drum. And I'm looking at the RME's readout, and I can clearly see that there's several instruments here, the drums, at around 20 hertz, 25, 30, 40, 50 hertz. And they're peaking all the way up to about negative 20 decibels. Now, all the other instruments are about even. So all the other instruments here, including the mids and the treble, are about between negative 40 and negative 20 decibels. But the drum is what keeps coming out. I mean, you can clearly hear it. I hear the electric guitar, and it sounds a little bit pulled back, a little bit muted because of that drum rumble in the left ear cup. So the electric guitar is supposed to be up front, and it's not really being pushed through the mix. It almost sounds like it's in the background somewhere, that you're on the stage and somebody put a giant curtain in front of the electric guitarist, and you're listening to the guitar through that curtain. And I'm going to skip ahead a little bit because right around the middle of this song, there's supposed to be a pause and then back with the drums with force. So right about here. And you have just the drums playing. Dun, 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 dun. I'm going to increase the volume. I'm going to negative 20. No distortion with the bass. I can still hear the other instruments in the mix, though they are further back from the bass instruments. So I would say all the other instruments, if you have a big soundstage, are probably 1 to 2 steps behind the bass, and the bass instruments are taking forefront here. Okay, so what I've learned, and bring the volume back down here to negative 42. So what I've learned, which hopefully you've picked up on, is that bass response really doesn't distort the rest of the frequency range. Now, it may not sound great to you. You may not be the type that says, I want, bass emphasis. So that's a separate issue. But the bass doesn't seem to distort the other instruments in a song like Bim Bam Smash. So we did 2 different versions of orchestral pieces. We did Scherzo for X-Wings, which does have a treble emphasis, and we've done Bim Bam Smash, which has a bass emphasis. And the response comes out to be fairly similar, which is the bass instruments, if they're present, become accentuated, and the treble gets decentuated, gets rolled off. That leaves you with a pretty easy listening experience. If you're the type of person that likes to simply listen to your songs without wanting a whole lot of detail, because the RH-2 simply won't provide that amount of detail, and you just simply want to have fun with your music or your movie that you're watching, the RH-2 it's not a bad option at all. If you're the type to watch movies on your PC, or you have a wireless system where you've hooked up with your TV and it's sending Bluetooth and you've got a Bluetooth receiver, and you plug in with the RH-2, you kind of get that subwoofer effect. Now, if you have a 2.1 system or something in your house where you've got 2 speakers and you've got a subwoofer, or you have a sound bar with plus a subwoofer, a decent one, you should be able to hear that rumbling effect from the subwoofer and that thunk, the hard punching effect from the subwoofer. And if you don't have that setup, getting a headphone that does kind of reproduce some of that sub-bass rumble and that bass emphasis can be a pleasant experience if it's done correctly. And I think the driver in the RH-2 is tuned, in my opinion, just the right way so that you do get that bass emphasis without the distortion. You do get the bass punch without it sounding too hard hitting so that it overrides all the other instruments and drowns them out. But in the same vein, you also lose out on the details in a track. And if you're watching a movie and you just want to enjoy the movie, or you just want to enjoy an orchestral piece without being fatigued, then maybe that's really what you're after. Now, there's a big difference between the RH-2 and Bose. What Bose, Bose and Beats. What Bose and Beats do, specifically Beats more often than not, is that they take the bass and they add the sparkle so that it becomes uncomfortable in both regions, right? So you have a Beats headphone and they'll bump up the mid bass, or depending on the headphone, they'll bump up the sub bass. And it becomes so accentuated that it just starts distorting the bass region altogether. And in order to fix that, in order to try to retain or pretend that there is indeed detail in the headphone, what they'll do is they'll add more treble emphasis. And so now you get that sparkle back, and it makes you think, oh man, I'm listening to these hip hop songs, and I feel the bass, and the bass may sound good to you, and then you hear the vocals, and you hear that sparkle and that push in the treble region, and you might go, wow, these, I can hear the vocal. Well, what you're hearing is an accentuation of those 2 frequency regions, and that it's not altogether flattering for the vast majority of music out there. If all you do is listen to hip-hop, then it might be pleasant, right? But if you listen to a wider gamut of music, Beats headphones are just not good for that. They're very specialized for what they do, and arguably they may not do a great job. Then you have Bose, which is not as bad as Beats, but they still have very loosey-goosey bass. And their bass response can be pleasing for the average person. But put a Bose headphone next to, say, the RH-2, you can hear a difference. And an average person might still prefer the Bose, but an individual who's looking for a little bit more accuracy in the bass might prefer the RH-2. It's not a huge difference. I wouldn't say that Bose headphones and the RH-2 or Beats and RH-2 are leagues apart, like the difference between Beats and the Clear from Focal. That's leagues apart. They're clearly related in tuning. But I think that the RH-2's tuning, the driver, is better controlled. Consequently, if you want that bass response, if you want an easier listening experience without going through the whole Beats nonsense and without having to shill out the cost of a Bose headphone, then I think the RH-2 might be worth considering. It's not going to be for everybody. And I think that people who are looking for neutral, who want detail, are going to be exceptionally unhappy with these headphones. Those who just want a fun sound signature, more or less a V-shaped sound signature, but obviously you have that treble roll-off, so it's not a true V-shape, that you might be happy with the RH-2. Now, the RH-2 is affordable enough. It's around, the price fluctuates on Amazon, so it's either $50 or $60, depending on where you get it. So let's just say $60. You get the RH-2 for $60, and then you hook it up to a decent amplifier. It doesn't, hooking up an RH-2 to the RME is, you're taking a $60 headphone and hooking it up to $1,100, $1,200 amp DAC, and that's, for some people that's fine. I think that you're not really gaining a whole lot from doing that. The reason I'm doing it is so that I can have a bass line. I can just say I have a neutral amp DAC, and I'm not influencing the sound signature because the amp and the DAC are not adding any coloration. So I'm trying to explain to you the actual sound of the headphone as best as I can. But if you take, say, the RH-2 with, say, the Shit Magni, and you have the Modi or some other DAC, or you just even plug it into your USB stick amp DAC, you can have a fairly decent, a very good bass reproduction, really easy listening treble reproduction, and a recessed mids to a certain degree, and a loss of mids detail. But if that's the type of sound signature you're looking for, the RH-2 might just do it for you. Now, there are other headphones that are very similar to the RH-2, at least in design, so I don't know if the drivers and the tuning are exactly the same, but I wouldn't be surprised, because a lot of companies these days are just licensing the same driver and the same tuning from China and just slapping their names on the headphones, so it's entirely possible that could be the case. I think if you are interested in the RH-2, you should look at it for a couple of reasons only. Number one, comfort. The RH-2 is pretty comfortable for me. The round ear cups are okay. I would have preferred oval ear cups, but they sit around my ears well enough so that I feel no fatigue on my ears whatsoever, and I wear these headphones for over an hour at a time. The clamping force is perfect. It's not too much, it's not too little, it's just the right amount for me, and I simply cannot fathom anyone who would say that the RH-2's clamping force is overwhelming or too loose. Then you have the build. It's plasticky, it's light, it's not going to cause you any issues. It'll fold up and you can, take the headphone on a road trip or whatever you want to do. And then it's got a replaceable cable. So if for whatever reason you wanted to get a shorter cable, you want to get a better cable, whatever, your cable breaks, you can replace it easily, which I do appreciate. And a lot of headphones should implement that. And even more expensive headphones don't do it, like Beyerdynamic. And then finally, if you just want a headphone for everyday use with comfort and all the other factors, the RH-2 is a good option altogether looking at it. I hope this has been of some help. The RH-2 is a good headphone. Would I buy it? Maybe, maybe not. I just have so many other headphones that I'm happy with. I probably wouldn't go out and buy the RH-2 because I have alternatives. But if you don't have an alternative to the RH-2 and you are looking for that, then it is something that you should consider if you're in the market for that sort of thing. But if this is not your cup of tea, then look, the RH-2 is definitely not worth considering. If you're not looking for this particular sound signature, there is no other reason for you to buy the RH-2 or something similar to it. There's nothing about the headphone in any other respect that would say, you have to have these, you have to try these, right? I'll give you a counterexample, which is the Koss headphones, the Porta Pros and the KPH-30i. People often say, you got to get these, they're so cheap and they sound so good. Well, it's rare. They are rare headphones, right? For $30, you get decent sound quality and decent build quality. And so it's really hard to find headphones that are $30 and sound better than $30 headphones. And, they sound as good as maybe a $100 pair of headphones. So I understand that argument. But for $60 headphones like the RH-2, unless you're looking for that particular sound signature, I don't see any reason to actually go out and put your money down for it. Hopefully that's clarification enough for people. I hope all of you have a wonderful weekend. I hope that you all can get back to your lives and back to normalcy as soon as possible, and that we can all strive through and power through this coronavirus nonsense. Please take care, and I hope and wish all of you and your families the best.